being here. I am so excited to kick off our College and Career Readiness Workshop with Amanda Price from Oregon State University, and she is going to talk to us about college admission essays and providing some great tips and advice. So thank you, Amanda. I'll turn it over to you.
Sounds good. Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here today. Again, my name is Amanda. I've worked for OSU for just going on 9 years now. So the amount of essays that I've read in my time here are endless, could fill my entire room right now. So hopefully I'll be able to share some tips and tricks. I also kind of have some advice from other schools that maybe do the process a little bit differently. So I think when writing your essay, the very first thing that's the most difficult is figuring out what to say. So we have an activity. So you can pull a piece of paper, or I know you're on your computer, so if you have a little notepad on the computer feature, Word document, or whatever it is, you can do that. But I want you to begin to make a list of items or objects that best represent you. So an example of this would be, for myself, I love to run. And I've done a couple marathons, and that's important to me, and I feel very accomplished because I did those. And so maybe running shoes would represent something about who I am. So I want you to start doing that, to start creating that list, and thinking about those things that might be the best example of you. So it could be running shoes. I mean, you can see there, video game controller, Starbucks Frappuccino because you're addicted to coffee, like myself. It could be maybe a role that you play within your family or at school. You know, you're proud of being the club president or whatever that is. So start to think about those things, because the biggest challenge I always see when I'm working with students on their application essays is, where do I even start? What do I talk about? I mean, and that's even if you think you have nothing to write about, or if you have so much to write about and you don't know which one to pick. And I think this is a great practice to kind of start creating your list. And then you can say, if college is asking you about a goal that you have for yourself or something that you completed, you can start thinking, oh yeah, that's right. So she can do this example where I can start out and say, here's something that represents me, running shoes, and here's why, because I worked hard on this practice, and here's what helped me through that. It kind of gives you a little unique flair when an admissions advisor or someone in their committee is reading through your essay to kick it off with some type of example, as opposed to repeating the question and then going on from there. So it's always interesting when I see kind of some unique catches in what I'm reading, and this has just been a really helpful tool for students. So keep doing your list. We're going to go on to some examples of essays so that you get a better idea of what I look for when I'm reading through different things. So the first example that I have is a student that's answering a question about leadership experience. And so the question is asking, you know, what have you been involved in? What have you done? And there will be, it's hard to know what formats colleges want them in. But truly, when it's a question like this, it says, describe examples of your leadership experience in which you have significantly influenced others, helped resolve disputes, contributed to group efforts over time, consider responsibilities to initiatives taken in or out of school. When you read through that example, do you think that warrants bullet points, or do you think the college wants you to write more, describe examples, give a story? I mean, I'm kind of leading the question here, but so often when I'm reading the essays, I'll see, you know, this bullet point list of all these different things, and look at all those great things that student has been involved in. But that student, this essay will get a very low score from me because they didn't do what the question is asking them to do, which is to describe, to write. So first point, read through the question very clearly. Make sure you're going through and you're saying, okay, am I doing exactly what the question is asking me to do? Am I responding to every single part of it? Okay, perfect. And I wanted to give you an example of one essay that got the highest score from us, especially because this was also not a traditional response to the leadership or group contributions. So the person above has those kind of president, captain, all those things. Well, this person wrote about being the oldest sibling and that both of their parents had full-time jobs, And the leadership role that came to their mind was caring for their younger siblings. And then they gave clear examples of what they did. So they were in charge of picking them up from school, helping them with homework, cooking them dinner, and gave, a great sense of responsibility. So as you're reading through this essay, you're thinking, oh, but that's not like cool club member kind of thing. Well, that's not the highest priority in this essay. We just need to see an example from you. And so as you're thinking about those things in your life where maybe you didn't get involved in student activities while you were in high school, but maybe you had an after school job and that's why you couldn't, it's because that took up all your time. So those are outside of the box examples of how you can respond to questions like this, which are pretty standard college essay questions. So if you can't think of anything, think again. So this was probably one of the hardest questions that OSU had on their application. We've changed our prompt a little bit, so this is no longer being asked, but this is an example from last year. So the question is saying, handling systemic challenges, which first of all, I didn't know what the word systemic meant until I was much, much older. So you got to Google that first, right? But handling systemic challenges, describe your experience facing or witnessing discrimination. Tell us how you responded and what you learned from those experiences and how they prepared you to contribute to the OSU community. Okay, I don't know how you are, but in my brain, I go straight to discrimination, probably based off of cultural background. And there's so much going on in the news right now. We're not going to get into the details of that, but that's where your brain goes, I think, traditionally. And I can say that with confidence because those are the essays I read all the time. But in a different format, I also see how students are like, you know what, I don't know if I've ever really faced that. Maybe I see it on the news, but personally, I don't really think I have an example to share. And so many times the students will write their first sentence, I have not witnessed discrimination. Do you know that's an automatic fail for this essay? So even if it's true and accurate in your mind, I really want you to consider different forms of discrimination, or when you're thinking about what this question is asking, look up what systemic challenges means and read through other examples because it's not just one thing. So, and the sad part about this student is that they gave an actual example after that. So he could have done better, but so don't write that. Don't say you have never done something if the question's asking it. And then of course I want to give you an example of a great essay. And then this is a type of discrimination that your brain doesn't automatically go to, but absolutely works for the situation. So the student had difficulty in math. And then another student kind of noticed and made fun of him for being dumb. The teacher stopped the bullying, helped them learn a new method to figure out the material. I mean, so they're bullied, right? And that was kind of how they faced discrimination because they weren't good at a certain subject and they answered the question very well, every single part of it. So again, I'm gonna hit this one home because it's kind of, these are the most common mistakes that I see students making. So we ask a question about goals and task commitment, and it says, articulate the goals you have established for yourself and your efforts to accomplish these. Give at least one specific example that demonstrates your work ethic and diligence. So you're looking at that question, and my brain does go to this too, goals, right? That's a future question. That's something like, oh, what are my ambitions? What do I want to do? And so this student wrote, the goal is to become a doctor, get straight A's. Awesome, these are great goals. But the question, if you go back and read it, actually is asking you to talk about a goal that you've already accomplished. Articulate the goals you have established, already made for yourself, and your efforts to accomplish these. You already did it. So they didn't answer the question here. And this is a better example of what we're looking for. So this is my essay, if you couldn't imagine. So what I did, how I set up a training plan, the schedule that I followed, what hurdles came up, and then I accomplished the goal when I was done. So when you're getting this essay prompt for whatever college you're looking at, and you're reading the question, make sure to go over it a couple times, because I know for myself, articulate the goals, that means future, but that's not what that question is asking. It wants to know something that you've already completed, and then I don't want you to get a bad score in your essay. So just be really cognizant of that. I just want to throw this in here because it's kind of depending on where you are at in high school, the things that you can do now to kind of prepare yourself to write that future essay, to get involved in certain ways. So if you're a freshman in high school, you can start researching colleges right now. You can figure out what kind of college you like. You can start out, of course, academically strong, doing your best to maintain a great GPA, because of course that's going to go into admission and scholarships in the future. Summer year, you're going to take your practice tests, and then you can get really involved in extracurricular activities. So you will have something to write about when it comes time for that. Junior year is a great time to take your SAT or ACT. I know our current world is a little bit struggling to be able to provide those tests for you. A lot of colleges are moving to a test optional format, but if you are able to take it your 11th grade year, that's when you'd want to do it. Second little point, visiting campuses, a little bit hard to do in the midst of COVID, but so many colleges are offering virtual tour opportunities. I know OSU is, so you can actually meet with a tour ambassador or current student, and they will take you around portions of campus, kind of do a real-time tour, and so you can see it. And then this 11th grade is, of course, practice essay writing. So the essay, honestly, is one of the most important components of the application, and especially for scholarship consideration. And I'll give you an example. So you have a student, and maybe it's you, and you've done so academically well in high school. You're really, really proud of the grades that you've gotten. And you're thinking, I'm going to get all the scholarship money because I did so well in my classes. Yes, and maybe no. So you have that feeling, and then a student from Portland has the same GPA as you do, has the same test scores. Well, what makes the two of you different? You do have a lot of differences, but it's going to come down to that essay. So as a high achieving student, you can be looking at that thinking, oh, the essay really is going to make a difference. So you'll want to spend extra time on it. You'll want to make sure that is answering all the questions correctly, doing what you need it to do. And that's it. So 12th grade, of course, applying, keeping track of those deadlines, filling out your FAFSA, filling out applications for scholarships, always important. And that's it. So short and sweet, but I definitely wanted to leave time for questions. So I'm going to get it out of here, stop sharing, and go to you and your beautiful faces if I can get back there. Okay, cool. All right.
Okay.
So
yeah, so thank you so much. Before we go on to questions, that was so great. I mean, I learned so much just from that short presentation. And this is just supposed to be those quick, short workshops to give students all the information. So thank you for that. I'm going to turn it over to Danny and Stephanie to get our questions going.
Okay, just to start off, does anybody have a question that they would like to pose to Amanda themselves? That's okay if not. I can get the ball rolling with a question that I thought of.
Sure.
And that is, Amanda, do you have if you had one piece of advice to give students who are starting to write their essays, what would your number one piece of advice be?
Yeah. I mean, I just played it up and probably made you even more nervous about the essay, but really, you all have a story to share. And again, I want to go back to that first essay example that I shared with you about how that student didn't have traditional leadership experience. That can be a hurdle to think oh, I didn't do all these things I should have done. No, you have a story. All of you do. Regardless of what it is, you might think a college wants to hear something specific. No, they want to hear about you. They want to know who you are. They're building a class. They're trying to make sure that their college community represents their school well. And so they want to bring you into that school because of your personality, because of who you are. So I think that's the biggest tip or trick that I would say is that you might be nervous to write it, but I promise you do have something to write about. That's why we did the first example.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, because I've started trying to think of different topics and stuff. I was wondering if you prefer a more general essay or a more specific one focus essay, sort of.
Yeah, so that's kind of where it comes into play when you're reading through the whole question, because the college will make it very clear if they want one or two detailed examples versus a general overview. So for our essay, we want specific things. So we want really only 1 or 2 examples, or you're giving clear details. You don't have a lot of space. It's a very short essay. So you'll want to make sure that remember the bullet point example, talking a lot about different things without giving clarity or more feedback or more explanation is kind of like writing a bullet point list. It's great that you have all these things to share, but I would just hone in on one of them so that you can give a really clear picture of whatever that is: leadership, community service involvement, goals that you've set, all of those things. That's what I would say. That's a great question.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So what about for like Common App essays where it's not as like specific to one thing? How do you like go about that? What's your best kind of recommendation for that?
Definitely. So they're going to ask you a broad topic. That's when I would try to still hone in on one area that you can respond to their question. But if there are 2 or 3 different components where they kind of tie together, so, you played a sport, but that helped you be a great student because it taught you discipline, you can use those to play off each other and they can still work cohesively in your essay, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question, Amanda. So I know that test scores are optional this year.
Yeah. For us. Mhm.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what if they did really well, and they want to share that because that's something that they're proud of? Would you recommend that? And does that help them at all as far as getting admitted or scholarships?
Yeah, so definitely if you are proud of your score, you can submit it. We're going to be looking at everything, and that will go into the component where we look at your academic history, your academic rigor, and how you've challenged yourself. And obviously, if you're studying really hard for that test and you get a great score, that's going to reflect well on your admissions decision. What I will say is a test optional or even a test blind school, it won't put the test scores in a priority role for admission or scholarships because we don't want to penalize the students that choose not to submit them, if that made sense. So a student that submits their test scores for us does not have an advantage over someone who does not. So they're still considered equally for admission and scholarships. But if you're very proud of your test score, yes, please send it in because we want to see the full picture of who you are. Another component of that is if you're a student, OSU doesn't have a minimum GPA that you have to get, but we do have a preferred of a 3.0. So you don't have that 3.0 GPA, but you have a stellar test score, that's going to benefit you. That's going to help you because it's a different piece where it can show your academic track and maybe that you could be academically successful at our school. So those are the things that I would say. Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I have a question. I don't know if you can answer this, but we'll see. What are some of like the most interesting or favorite essays that you have read?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. And it's so funny because during reading season, which is like in November and December, all my colleagues and I will sit down together and not right now, COVID, but we'll be online and we'll talk about all the essays that we're reading and just what students say. And I think there are just some creative ways to share and engage with essays. So one student I remember was a robotics champion, and he put the link to his robotics competition, like the YouTube channel. And so we all went into his YouTube channel and he had all these videos to show. And I was like, that's a sneaky way to get us to see even more about you. But I loved that. That was super creative. But I think, yeah, I mean, kind of what I said before, you all have stories. And so it's always just heartwarming, if you will. I love reading essays because it's just you. And I mean, everyone's so different and something to bring to the table. So I'm trying to think. I'll think. We also make fun of, the ones that aren't so great. Here, I'll give you an example of the ones where you're like, just don't do this in an essay. A student applying to Oregon State at the end of their essay said, "Go Ducks." You can imagine that student wasn't looked on favorably. Just proofread your essay. We love the Ducks, but you know what I mean.
Okay, so do we have any last questions for Amanda? I think you covered everything so nicely.
Great.
It's such an honor to have you kick off this this workshop series, and we're just so excited. I'm sure that everybody can agree that we've all learned so much. Proofread, proofread, proofread for sure.
Seriously.
Reread that question, make sure you're answering it correctly. So thanks again. I appreciate it. I am going to turn it over real quick to Danny and Stephanie to do our raffle, and then we will say our goodbyes.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Yes, thank you, Amanda. Okay, so I'm going to be doing the raffle, and I have Elena, Alyssa, Bailey, Sierra, and Denali. Am I missing anybody? I think I can see everybody on the screen, but okay. Awesome. So I'm going to try to just show my phone and show the wheel. Can you all see that? Okay, let's do it. I think it. Oh, awesome. All right, Denali, you are the winner. Congrats. Thank you all so much for coming to this College and Career Readiness Workshop. Though really enjoyed all of you. Jessica, do you want to explain how we're going to get that raffle prize over?
Yes. So Denali, I will actually take this to Thurston this week, and I will put it in the mail for you. And so I'll mail it to your house, unless you would prefer me to leave it there. So you can message me and let me know if you want me to leave it there for you to pick up or mail it to you. Okay, so congratulations. Thank you guys so much all for attending, whether you're watching it live or pre-recorded. And again, thank you, Amanda, for sharing your knowledge with us. Appreciate it so much.
Absolutely. It's
All
good to see
right.
you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.